I don't want to waste any more time. I'm not going to sit here at home and not do the things that I actually want to do because, life is short and you're going to lose people and you're going to lose what you love and who you love. And you're not going to live forever. You might as well make the most of it.
We are heroes and dreamers. We are restless believers, stronger.
I am so excited and deeply grateful to have such an inspiring, uplifting, positive guest on the show. Lorena, thank you so much for being here and welcome to Empowering Vibes.
Oh, thank you so much. What a wonderful welcome.
I'm so happy that you're here and I can't wait for our conversation because we share a lot of common history. So that's actually where I would like to start the conversation with your personal journey. So think back like 5 or 10 years ago. Who was Lorena back then and who are you identifying with right now, or where are you right now in your life journey?
Oh, wow. What a big question to start off with. 5 or 10 years ago, I was, even a year from now, I was a completely different person, I would say. But if we go further back to kind of like the beginning of my journey, if you will, I would say I was severely codependent. Always in really sticky relationship dynamics, always looking for happiness outside of myself, always chasing success and achievement and recognition in some way, shape, or form. I was in a work that I didn't really fully love. It was fine, and I assumed it was my dream job. It wasn't. It turned out to be it wasn't at all. And yeah, now I'm just like I just feel very fulfilled within myself now. I've created a business that I love, that fulfills my soul. I have nourishing relationships. I like to say, rebirthed myself several times, which is a very difficult process because it really requires a lot of shedding and letting go and releasing of things that are very difficult to let go of. But it's always been super rewarding. So yeah, I'm a very different person from a few years ago, definitely, and it continues to evolve.
Wow. Amazing. And that's actually what you're teaching mostly as well, that you're teaching manifesting from an approach where it's not enough to think positive thoughts or to visualize 10 minutes a day, but it's like a holistic approach. Would you share more about that?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. And that kind of plays into my journey. So basically, when I started my, let's say, spiritual journey, and I found manifestation, and the place I came from, right, mentally was very attached, very much in like chasing, seeking, looking for validation outside of myself, looking for worthiness outside of myself, some recognition that I was worthy, some reassurance, some validation that I was worthy enough and deserving enough. And finding manifestation seemed like the perfect tool. Oh, cool. I can manifest anything I want. Amazing. I'm going to do that. And I followed the regular tools, let's say, where people say use affirmations and visualize yourself in your ideal reality and feel into it and all of these things. And that's what I started doing. And it did work, but with let's say, bigger things, the things that had more of an emotional charge to it, the things where my identity was a bit more wrapped up in it, where my self-worth was a bit more wrapped up in it, it backfired big time. And I got hurt over and over again. And what that led me to is actually, instead of manifestation becoming this tool of empowerment and supporting me in creating a life of abundance and love and joy, it made me more and more frustrated and anxious because I was overthinking it. I was thinking I wasn't doing it right. I wasn't seeing results. And then I started doubting myself and questioning myself. So I really had to strip it back and bring it back to the core of what do I actually feel? What do I actually believe? And why is this not working? And what I came to was that I was neglecting everything that wasn't up here, right? So a lot of manifestation work tends to be very mind focused. And I had to figure out that I was neglecting my emotional experience. I was denying and repressing emotions. I was denying and repressing and hiding parts of myself that I felt shame for. And I was also neglecting my body. So I was not regulating and expanding my nervous system. So I didn't feel safe to receive. So there was a lot that played into it beyond the mind that I hadn't realized before. And it brought me into a deep journey of healing, of shadow work, really making all these unconscious parts of myself and these old emotions, old trauma, making all that conscious, bringing it to the surface in order for it to be integrated and accepted and loved within me, so that I could finally manifest from an authentic place, from an embodied place, from an aligned place, and really follow the desires that my heart and my soul truly wanted, rather than what I thought would make me feel good or give me some sense of self-worth.
I love that approach so much because it's been the same journey for me. And it's like I've so much lived in my mind, neglected my whole body. And what I love, about manifesting is, the saying of like, you don't manifest what you want, but you manifest who you are. And that
Yeah.
I think is the core essence of it. And it's not about any of those shiny objects, the whatever impact you make, the success, whatever. It's actually about who you're becoming on this journey. And also that approach, what I loved is that you said it's been a lot of releasing, letting go, and so on, because I also noticed myself when I started with my personal development journey, I always thought I needed to become something and I always needed to get better. And it was like almost that I burned myself out with constantly striving to get better. And once I understood personal development from a rather spiritual perspective of that I am everything already, but it's about letting go and shedding the layers, that's where everything changed for me. And that's, I think, the approach that you do too. So
Yeah.
would you like to tell us a bit more about the whole thing? Like, okay, let's say I have a vision. I want to create this vision into my life. I know that I need to become that person that attracts these things or that has these things already in my life. But I think and am this right now, or whoever listening. How do we get from here where we are and believing and having this identity to shifting our whole identity and becoming that person that we see in our vision that like automatically attracts whatever we want to have in our life?
Yeah, wow, I love that. That's, again, a really big question and the core of the work I do, really. And, what I coach my clients through, it's a whole process because essentially you're rebirthing, you're shifting your entire identity. So I don't call myself a manifestation coach for that reason. I call myself a self-concept coach or a self-concept mentor because it's really about, like you said, you don't manifest what you want, you manifest who you are. So it's about, who do you perceive yourself to be? What is the identity that you are embodying in this moment? And, on a healing journey, we often think about fixing things or becoming somebody new. But as you say, it's really more about stripping off the layers of everything that is not you. So that is definitely the first thing to honor and to acknowledge, that there's nothing wrong with you and there's nothing to change about you. It's more a change in perception. And that automatically will then change how you show up and what you attract. So what I like to do with my clients is, firstly, if you come to me and you say, I have this desire, I have this big dream, and I don't feel in alignment with, that version of myself that would effortlessly call that in. I usually start with getting complete clarity on where the person is at in that moment. So that looks like seeing what activates them, what triggers them, what are the beliefs that they have about certain circumstances, about certain people or groups of people. And then I ask them to go really deep into the vision, to really explore the vision and really try to feel themselves into it. And that alone is already quite powerful, because with that, not only comes the clarity, which then can already teach you, okay, who do I need to be to call this in? Where is that not in alignment with where I'm currently at? But it will also bring up all of your stuff. It will bring up all of the blockages. It will bring up all of the subconscious fears. It will bring up all of the assumptions that you have about who you are and what you can or can't be or do. So from that place, we then tend to go into a process of really surrendering to all of that, both in a matter of, in the sense of acceptance, but also on a more nervous system level. So a lot of the work that I do with the people I work with my clients, is really work with kind of slowly stretching the nervous system to be able to sit with more discomfort. It's not a comfortable process, because often what keeps us from becoming who we desire to be and from calling in what we desire to call in is that it's new, it's uncomfortable, and we are going to come up against uncomfortable emotions, uncomfortable states, uncomfortable sensations. So we need to learn to sit with that. So that surrender element is a big one as well. And then the whole identity rebirth element is primarily about really subconscious work. So that can look like somatic work. It looks like shadow work. So really bringing all of these unconscious parts to the surface. Any fears, any emotions, anything you don't want to look at, anything you judge in yourself, anything you don't want others to see, because those are often the things that are blocking you. So an example that I like to give is when I was in school, I had a crush on a boy and I had such a big crush on him. And one day I got a call seemingly from that boy, but it was actually from some of the students in school who pretended to be him. And I felt so humiliated because I really believed it was him. And I carried that fear of humiliation with me for pretty much all my life. And I had such a strong fear of being humiliated that I didn't go for the things I wanted. I was subconsciously blocking myself from ever stepping into that, because I didn't want to repeat what had come true years and years ago. So we can block ourselves in really subtle ways. So I really love diving into that as well, and then making peace with these parts and embracing these parts. And then lastly, there's also a big component with, when it's after the shedding and after the releasing, there's also a big component of embodiment. And that really is about feeling into that version of yourself, getting clear on what would that version of yourself do? How would she show up? How would she talk to other people? Who would she become? How would she feel? And practicing feeling into that and putting yourself in situations where you get to practice that, right? If you, for example, want to be a woman who lives in a big mansion, put yourself in a big mansion. Go to a real estate agent and, go look at a big mansion, even though you maybe can't afford it right now. Like, put yourself in these situations. And with that, you will also see any limitations that come up, anything in your body or in your subconscious that comes up that says, oh, this is uncomfortable because I don't belong here. So that's a very broad answer to this question.
And we'll dive deep into every aspect because I love these topics so much. What I would like to dive in is what you said like a few minutes ago about that you sit, like you work with your clients to sit into this discomfort of kind of like expanding.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
how do you do that? How do we do that to get into this discomfort of like growing?
Yeah. So it depends on, that's a great question, by the way. And it depends really on what it is and where the client is at or where the person is at. So something that I suggest everybody does is Kundalini yoga. I'm a big fan of Kundalini yoga because a lot of the work in Kundalini yoga is really about expanding the nervous system and strengthening the nervous system. So you will have a lot of practices where you, for example, have your arms up for a really long time, which feels painful and feels uncomfortable, but actually you can do it. So that's a bit of a thing that you can do because that teaches you, it's kind of mind over matter, and you can actually do it and you can sit with the discomfort. And the more you practice sitting with discomfort intentionally through physical means, the more you'll be able to sit with emotional discomfort also. And the other side is sitting with the fears and the emotions that come up. So very often when we come up against some sort of uncomfortable emotion that naturally arises when we try to stretch ourselves, when we try to tap into a different version of ourselves, right? If I imagine myself to be, a lot further along than I am, that's going to create discomfort in my body because everything in me will reject that because it doesn't align with the identity that I currently have. So my subconscious will be like, whoop, we're not used to that. That's not familiar. That's not safe. So let's not do that. So it's about really committing to that and, approaching it from a perspective of this is just a sensation. This is just an emotion. This is just a fear. Can I just be with that? Can I just breathe into that? Big fan of breathwork as well for that reason. Can I just breathe into that? Can I just hold space for that? Can I just be with that? And that's a lot of the work I tend to do with my clients. You can also obviously do that on your own, but that's why I love having a safe container, and whether that's a coach or a therapist or even a friend who can really be with you in that, so you feel a little bit safer to explore these intense emotions because it really isn't comfortable. So that's a way to, stretch yourself and expand your nervous system here. And then also the example that I gave earlier, to put yourself in environments where it's, where you stretch yourself a little bit. The key thing with any of this, however, is you want to stretch yourself to a place of discomfort to kind of meet your edge. So you're expanding, you're not staying where you are, but you don't want to jump ahead too far so that you feel unsafe and that you collapse, because feeling unsafe is not going to help you. It's actually going to, bring you further into a contraction. And also, it could bring up all sorts of old stuff that you don't want to bring up because it could be traumatic. So, it's about meeting that edge, but not bringing yourself to a point of, I do not feel safe in this. So it's a bit of a step-by-step process. I find often people like to jump ahead too quickly or too far because they're so excited for a change, but it's often actually better to go more step by step.
I love that approach so much because it's about lasting change. There's no thing like I've heard so many stories of people manifesting something, but then they couldn't hold that energy for a long time. And then there's no purpose in manifesting it if you lose it right after again. Like, okay, maybe that you are like able to do it, but if it's not like transform it like a real life transformation, and that is your new standard, then what is it all for? So I love that approach. And I don't know if you know it, but I also own a yoga company. So, and I love
So
this also, this combination of this work, this body based, our breath, like our breath is the most powerful tool that we have. And I love also to like, I got over yoga into personal development and into the mind aspect. And those two combined to like when you're sitting on your mat in a meditation or during a yoga practice, to see what's coming up and then how does this manifest in my life, and then to also the other way around. I love this game of like body and mind, and I love your approach. So thank you so much for sharing.
yeah. You said that really well. I love that a lot. And it's true. We want lasting change. We can get quick manifestations. I can visualize something and it can appear. And obviously it doesn't always happen that way, but it can happen. But can you maintain it? And also, do you feel fulfilled with it? Because often when we look for a manifestation to fulfill us, we can get the thing but still not feel good within ourselves. So it's really about becoming a new version of yourself rather than and feeling good during the process as well, rather than just manifesting things here and there, because it is a complete rebirth when you do it in a sustainable way, and it does change your life. And then when difficult circumstances hit you, because inevitably life is not going to be perfect, doesn't matter how great you are at creating your reality, things are going to happen. And you can hold that also. Then you know that doesn't say anything about you. You're essentially indestructible. And if we look at this from like a very spiritual perspective. So yeah, it's all about the complete transformation.
Yes. Plus, often this version of ourselves that has this manifestation has to go through that, whatever life throws at us, to become whoever we become. Because it's not only, like in my experience, it's not only like I do so much coaching work, workshops, seminars, all these things. But then actually the things that life throws at me that I got a handlens on, this is like where the real growth happens. Because I think it's one thing to sit through fear or to some unpleasant emotions in a coaching session where somebody holds this container for you, but a total different thing if you're like out in real life, or let's call it like this. And I find that's why also this balance between life and then coaching, like having somebody who has your back all the time and that you can come to with those emotions, is so beautiful. And why I believe coaching, like that everybody should have a coach to help him navigate the challenges that life has.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's an ongoing process. And yeah, life will throw these things at you so you can become that new version of yourself, really. If I think about every time I've been stretched, I've had to really contract first, and I've had to go through a difficult time first to turn into a new version of myself. For example, at the beginning of this year, unfortunately, I lost my cat and went through a big grieving process. And honestly, it was one of the most, if not the most devastating loss I've ever experienced. And I've lost people also, but that had a whole different level because he was my whole world. And I fell into a big hole, obviously, as you do with grief, and into this big contraction. And I'm now coming out of it as such a different version of myself. And I would never say it was worth it or I'm grateful for that, because I'm not. I would rather this hadn't happened. But it also, in a way, needed to happen for me to be who I am now. I would not be who I am now if I hadn't experienced loss. And that applies to not just that example, but so many other examples in my life. And I feel like probably everybody will on some level be able to relate to that if you've had a big loss or a heartbreak, like a breakup can do the same thing, or losing your job. In the moment, it feels so like the end of the world. And maybe it is in that moment. But when you grow from it, and when you transform through it, and when you build a new future from it, you look back and you see, okay, this sucked. I hated this. But in a way, it did have to happen for me to have this realization, or for me to become this person, or for me to do this thing that I otherwise wouldn't have done. So, sometimes the worst things that happen to us can turn out to be a blessing in disguise as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For maybe there's somebody listening right now who has just experienced either a heartbreak or a loss. What would you say? What is the gift in the loss that you experienced, or in how can this person listening or watching see something positive in what happened?
Yeah. So I would say if it's a fresh loss or a fresh heartbreak, don't look for the gift. I would say just be in that, just feel that, allow it to suck, because you don't have to be grateful for it, and you don't have to find the silver lining, and you don't have to look for the gift. So I would say if there is a fresh loss, just be with that experience and be fully present with it. Allow yourself to be fully present with it. Ask for the support you need, like ask your friends for help, and really feel your feelings, whatever that looks like for you. For some people that looks like distraction, for other people that looks like really being with the emotions. I would say the actual blessings and silver linings, and I say this deliberately in quotation marks because, again, I don't think we need to be grateful for our trauma. We can acknowledge that it's not, that we would rather not have experienced that. But if you keep going, if you don't let that ruin your future, right? And in the moment, it does feel like it's ruining your future, and that's okay. But if you're a bit further along on your journey, then you will automatically see the blessings, I would say. So for me, every time I've kind of gotten out of this I went through a big heartbreak last year as well. So there's been a lot of loss and grief and heartbreak over the last few years for me. And in the moment, I couldn't see it. And I couldn't try to see it. If I had sat down and said, okay, what's the gift in this? It would have just led to a lot of resistance. But looking back, I am now open through this relationship ending to completely new type of love that previously I didn't even think I deserved. And now I know and feel that I deserve it. Through losing my cat, although, that was such an awful experience, and I would rather have him back. If I could, I would take it all back. But I really learned through that to be grateful for every moment, to be more present, to really cherish every experience. And also, it helped me step further into my desires ultimately, because I almost had this attitude suddenly of, I don't want to waste any more time. I'm not going to sit here at home and not do the things that I actually want to do because, life is short and you're going to lose people and you're going to lose what you love and who you love. And you're not going to live forever. You might as well make the most of it. So it kind of gave me that as a gift as well. But whatever the gift is for you, for anybody who's watching and who's maybe been through a loss or a heartbreak, don't look for the gift yet, but there will be something very unique for you. And you will usually only be able to see it and feel it once you're out of it. And that's okay. That's okay. It will come naturally. But allow it to transform you. Don't try to move on from it. Don't try to move on from grief or heartbreak or loss. Let it become a part of you.
What I didn't want to say before, because I didn't want to interrupt you, is that I'm truly sorry for your losses.
Thank you.
And what I really, really love about your approach is that you allow feelings to be. I feel like I can say this from my own experience. I've been cut off of my own feelings because I feel so deeply for years, decades. And all it did is that it led me to mental health issues. And I really had to truly allow a relationship with my own feelings to, like, it was from like, oh, I feel something. What is it? I couldn't even tell if I feel like right now angry or sad, or I just felt edgy, or like felt off, I don't know, to like really understanding my feelings, now truly knowing like what message my feelings have. And that has led me to like the life that I live today, and to like such a deeper relationship with myself. But I feel very often we get these messages of like a mindset. Mindset is so important. I love mindset. I love mindset work, but it's like the mind is so quick, and sometimes our feeling and our body isn't as quick. So I feel it's so important that you're saying like, allow yourself to feel it, allow yourself to sit in it. Like that's a healthy part of letting go of a certain emotion. So thank you so much for sharing that message, because I feel like we need to hear this more often, that it's okay to feel grief, sadness, whatever it is, anger.
Yeah. Yeah. We often reject or repress emotions because they don't feel good. Because they don't feel good, first of all. So we don't want to feel them. It's too uncomfortable. So we, numb or suppress or run away from them. But then also because sometimes we make it mean something about ourselves, especially in like the whole self-development, personal development world and the spiritual community. There's a lot of messaging about we're all one and all of that stuff where, yeah, that's true, but also we're human. And this is why I also take such a grounded approach to manifestation, because we can very often be somewhere up here, but we're also having a very real and lived human experience where things don't always go as planned, and that's okay. And it's really about finding the balance and not making anything wrong. I'm a really big believer in there's no such thing as a negative emotion. Like there's no value in either direction. Joy is not better than fear, right? It's all equal really, because we need the duality as well. You can't feel love if you don't know what fear feels like. You can't feel oneness if you don't know what separation feels like. You can't know peace if you don't know what anger feels like. We need the polarity of the two. So yeah, it's all equal and it's all welcome, and it's more about how do we approach these emotions, and what meaning do we give this, and how do we not make it mean anything about who we are or who we're becoming.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love it. Also in the context of spirituality, of manifesting, like so often it seems like manifesting is a lot about just thinking positive, like everything's always shiny and bright and that. And as soon as I feel all these other, which I judge, or like the mind judges as negative emotions, I'm not manifesting what I am. But then actually that's where shadow work, I feel like, or from my own experience, I thought I always need to think positive, be positive and so on. And that's how I manifest my stuff. But once I started to dive into shadow work, and that's also like a big part of your work, and see like, okay, what part of me feels shame or something about something like this, or what part of me judges these emotions, for example. And once I learned to integrate that part, like for me, that's where the whole game changed a lot. So would you like to talk more about shadow work, how you approach it, your experience?
Yeah, my experience is actually very, very similar, because I also came from a place of, assuming I always had to, if I want to be in this state, then obviously if I was this version of myself, if I was this person, if I had these things, I wouldn't feel the fear. I wouldn't feel all of these sticky emotions. First of all, that's not true. whether you're struggling for money or you're a millionaire, you can have the exact same fears. Whether you are in a loving relationship and it's a very secure, beautiful partnership, or you constantly come up against difficult relation or toxic relationship dynamics, or you're single, you can have the same fears, you can have the same beliefs about yourself, you can have the same insecurities. They're just going to manifest and show up in different ways, but we have the same feelings. So for me, I also had this realization of I'm coming up against the same patterns over and over and over again. What is this inside of me that's preventing me from stepping into this? And once I really brought these things to light, and the way I approach shadow work with my clients and also myself when I do it on my own, but also when I go really deep, I also hire somebody to hold the space for me there, because especially with the more traumatic stuff or the, let's say, darker shadows, it can be a very vulnerable experience, and it can be a very challenging experience. But some of the tools that I like using on my own is breath work, because it really, especially transformational breath work, because it really brings up, it's a very somatic experience, and it brings up all of the subconscious stuff. Because the thing is with what's in your shadows, it's called shadow because it's not conscious, right? It's unconscious, it's pushed down. So shadow work can be so tricky because we sometimes don't even know where to start, because our subconscious is so smart. It's deliberately hiding it from us because it doesn't want us to know. Because if we know, then, it's not protecting us. Essentially, it just wants to protect you. It just wants to protect you from experiencing experiences that you've made in the past that were uncomfortable or painful. It wants to protect you from your biggest fears coming true. It wants to protect you from an identity that you don't want to embody, who you don't want to be. It wants to protect you from all of these pieces. So it's not going to be visible. And it does take some conscious effort to make them visible. And that can look like journaling. Journaling is a great tool for that. Really exploring, what do I feel shame for? What do I not want other people to see? What do I judge myself for? What do I judge others for? That's also how our shadows come up, right? Like, when am I jealous? When am I judging another person? Because that shows you, do I judge that part within myself also? Most likely, yes. And apologies for that. Little siren in the background.
No problem at all.
And yeah, breath work can bring that to the surface. Talking to somebody, to a professional, can bring that to the surface, who can really, see things that you might hide from yourself, that you might hide from others. So there's a lot that can be done, but it's usually a very long process. And I don't mean to say that to scare people, because sometimes when you say, oh, it can take a long time, people are like, oh, why should I even try? But it's a very rewarding process, because essentially shadow work is all about, or shadow integration rather, it's all about re-owning parts of yourself that are a part of you anyway, that you've just repressed, denied, hidden away, dismissed. But when you bring them to the surface, and when you own them, and when you love them, you feel so much more whole, right? It's like, even, let's say, before coming onto this podcast today, I felt like really nervous, and I had been like, oh my God, I'm like really nervous to do an interview. What I would then have done is I would have come on here and been like, hi, I'm really excited, but really nervous to be here. I would have just voiced that, because that alone brings something to the surface, right? And it's more about yourself, not about other people, that then gives some sense of acceptance and self-love and acknowledgement that the fact that this is here is welcome. I am okay the way I am. It's okay to be nervous. It's okay to feel fear. It's okay to feel this and that. And often when we don't do that, when we just push it aside and we're like, this isn't here, I'm pretending it's not here, what you often see happen in manifestation communities, where people are like, I'm just ignoring this circumstance, I'm just ignoring this emotion, I'm just ignoring this reality. But then it just gets bigger, because what you resist persists. The more you try to ignore something, the more you're actually focusing on the problem. If you're like, I'm pretending it's not here, but actually you're aware it's here, you're just turning it into a bigger problem than it actually needs to be. So yeah, that's why shadow work is super, super powerful, to uncover all the blockages and to really manifest from a state of self-love and wholeness and authenticity as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was also like, when you're talking, I was like reflecting, and I think what shadow work really did is like, or is continuously doing, is that I feel more whole. And I think as
Yeah.
spiritual beings, or like we want to become this whole soul that we actually are again and integrate all aspect of us. And there, I cannot, I'm just paraphrasing it because I can't, like, I'm not so good with, I love quotes, but I'm not so good at citing them. Um, there's this quote of Mother Teresa where she said, like, only when I acknowledged that I also have a Hitler in me, I could kind of like do good in the world and be the person I was meant to be. And that is like so powerful. And like, that's why I love quotes so much. They really like are the essence of these big concepts. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Also for your vulnerability. I truly see that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I love that quote. I've not heard of that one, but
Yeah.
yeah, it makes sense. We all have whatever monsters we're seeing in other people, or fears, or even it can even manifest in positive things, right? Like if we look at somebody who maybe has the success that we desire and we feel jealousy, that we only feel that jealousy because we have the same potential in us. So shadow doesn't have to be all negative and dark and evil. It can also be something that inspires us, but that for some reason we think isn't possible for us. So, looking at how you perceive other people is really powerful to get started with shadow work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. That's what I like. Once I started to understand that whoever I admire and basically like the light that I see in others is also within me, like
Mm.
that's when you start to also, if you, as you say, start to feel jealous or envy or something when you see others, like to know that whatever you experience, like this is within you and you have the potential as well to create that life or to do whatever impact you want to do. Like that's when you take your own power back, and that's why I love this work so much.
Yeah. Beautiful.
I would like to talk about two more things that
Mm.
come. One thing that is very very often you mentioned, like the topic of self-worth, and that so often like it's about how we feel about ourselves, if we feel worthy of, no matter it's a certain manifestation or that if something that is in our lives make us feel unworthy and so on. How do you help people to feel more worthy?
Yeah. So shadow work is a big aspect of that, honestly, because, it's often connected to not feeling worthy. And even when we're trying to manifest something, it's always important to ask yourself, why do I really want this? Because sometimes, I, for a really long time, wanted a relationship with a specific person who I was so in love with. And I had to admit to myself at some point, do I actually really want this? Or do I just want this because I think it's going to prove to me in a backwards way that I'm worthy of love? So self-worth is therefore super important, because it can actually, not feeling worthy can block us from receiving what we want, because we're essentially sabotaging ourselves from actually receiving it, right? If I don't feel worthy of having money, I'm going to energetically repel it. If I don't feel worthy of healthy love, I'm going to seek out emotionally unavailable partners. So self-worth is a big thing. And really, how to feel more worthy, it's more about, where do you not feel worthy? Why is that? Exploring that. And, integrating these pieces also and making them also okay, because all of you is worthy, right? You're worthy whether you're having a successful podcast, or you're worthy whether you're lying in bed crying and, you know, not having washed your hair in 2 weeks. You're still worthy. So shadow work is a big component of that, and kind of going back to the places and the experiences to when you were made to feel like you're not worthy, which often, obviously, as everyone watching this or listening to this will probably know, originates in childhood most of the time for most people.
Absolutely. I always like to, when I feel this feeling of unworthiness, I love to like picture, or like I just have, or like no, now it's 1.5 years ago, a baby niece. And like
Mhm.
whoever might even have an own child, like those children are unconditionally loved. No matter if they cry, if they poop, whatever it is, like we
Yeah.
only have pure love for them. And then at some point, like that was us too, you know? And then we think like when we get older, we have to earn it by achieving something, looking a certain way, having a certain financial status, whatever it is that we kind of get conditioned by. And I always like to remind myself of like this baby who's just because it exists is so loved, and that,
Mhm.
you know, we are that like that too. And I find that is a beautiful metaphor to see also, to feel worthy no matter, even if we're on the bed crying.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah, I tell all my clients, and I do the same. Actually, I don't have my phone on me right now, but my phone background is me as a baby, because when I notice myself talking negatively to myself and putting myself down, and as most people, I'm on my phone way too much. And I'll have my phone in my hand and I'll see that picture of me and I'm like, oh my God, that's who I'm talking to. Like, I'm talking to this little baby. Like, why do I do that? And a big part, of course, of why a lot of us don't feel as worthy as we are is because of our society, right? We're made to feel that way. If we had grown up away from society in a little tribe where everybody's equal, would you question the way you look? Would you overthink what you do? What would success even mean to you? Would that even be a thing for you? So yeah, it's a lot of external influences, and that's why it's all about, like we said in the beginning, about peeling off the layers and about deconditioning, really. And there's a lot of talk about reprogramming the subconscious. And yes, but before we can program something in the subconscious, we need to deprogram what's there. So, there's a lot of programming that goes on. Like, the only reason we don't feel worthy is because either an experience or another person or something that we've observed outside of ourselves has led us to believe that we're not. It's not because there's something wrong with us.
Absolutely. That actually leads me to my last question that I have, is regarding how, let's say I have the belief of, yeah, let's stay with worthiness. I'm not worthy. I can tell myself 10,000 times I am worthy.
Mhm.
If I don't feel it, it will never sink in. So
Yeah.
how can we transform limiting beliefs on a subconscious level?
Big question. So you just gave the example of an affirmation, right? Like, I'm using the affirmation, I am worthy. And my approach with affirmations is a bit different because, as you say, I can say that 100 times and still not feel it. So if you want to use that approach, let's just go with that. I say, notice what comes up for you. What comes up? Where do you feel in your body, where the resistance comes up when you say I am worthy? Because when you say I am worthy but you don't really believe it in your body, something in your body is going to speak up. So somewhere in your body you're going to feel a resistance. So I really like feeling into that and tapping into that, and noticing, what is that sensation. I even like working with visualization and just really tapping into, okay, what does that resistance, that part of me that clearly doesn't think that I'm worthy, what does that part look like, feel like? Where is it situated? What is the sensation in my body? If it had something to say to me, what would it say? Why would it say that? I start having a conversation with it, because that is also essentially shadow work, right? We're bringing that part to the surface that doesn't feel worthy so that we can get to know it better, and so that we can essentially hold it by the hand and say, I know you don't feel worthy. You are, but it's okay that you don't feel worthy. But I'm taking charge here. You're okay. You're safe. Doesn't matter what you've been led to believe. So that's an approach that I like to use. And something that I also like to do, and I'm giving so many examples, by the way, because people are different. Not that the same thing isn't going to work for everybody. Different things work for different people. But something that I also like doing is using more of an embodiment approach, where I really like tapping into that feeling of I am not worthy and noticing what that feels like and what my body does. Maybe I will start contracting. Maybe I will start hiding. Maybe I will, like just want to contract, want to be really small. So if that's how I want to show up, if I feel like I'm not worthy, what would the opposite look like? What would the opposite feel like? Can I go against that with my body, right? If I am not worthy makes me contract, can I open myself up? Can I let my body take over, and kind of go against the natural instinct? Because it's not just mind, as we just discussed, it's not just mind, it's not just telling yourself, it's also how does it feel. So if you're kind of working with the somatic element first, you're kind of working with the body first, you can sometimes trick your mind and make yourself question your mind, because that's just a sentence, right? I'm not worthy is just a sentence. So when your body then shows up confident and, authentic and yes, I got this, it's almost like your mind will then go, wait, why? It's almost like you're confusing your mind and you're then saying, but I thought we didn't feel worthy. Why are we showing up like this? So you can kind of, it's almost like a little pattern interrupt to do this practice.
Amazing. I love it. I love it. There are actually so many studies that show like working with power poses, like putting your hands in the hips and stuff like this, how like cortisol drops and so on. And like really like that our hormones change just by changing our body posture. So I love this approach of like mixing that up with our beliefs that we're having. So thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, I'm glad it's helpful. Yeah, I hope somebody can benefit from this and try some of this out today.
I am so sure. There were so many nuggets of wisdom. So thank you so much for your time, for sharing all of this wisdom. It was truly, I could talk with you for hours. I really thank you so much for sharing this. I'm sure so many people got so many tools, like actual tools that they can work with to better their life. So thank you for the light that you're shining in the world.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, honestly.
Thank you.
Now, I would like to know from you, what was your biggest takeaway and how can you put it into action starting now? Leave a comment below or hop over to Instagram at @HannahWiz_ and leave a comment under the post of today's episode. Thank you so much for watching and never forget to shine your light.